Okay, sound all right? A little low? You can hear okay? Okay. If you don't answer, then I think, well, you can't hear okay, so that's all right. Okay, I'm looking at page 19 and going into page 20 and try to do this entire section tonight. And if we could start with reading the Chinese say of the first two verses. In English it starts, disciple of the Buddha, listen well. Di Ting. So here we go, and then to the second one. Actually, yeah, second one. Maybe the third one too. Just do the third one tonight because the key concept occurs, the recurring line occurs in the third one. You have Jing Jin in the second verse. Everybody's following. So we have lines 1, 2, they're reading from left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, left to right, and then second one, Ru Yu. 1, 2, 3, 4, Jing Jin. And then you have the third one, which is Pi Ru, and then ends with key two characters in the fourth line, Xie Dai. Xie Dai. So let's go ahead reading this. 佛子善谛听无尽如是大，或有速解脱，或有难处理。如我求出灭，无量诸过恶，当于佛法中，勇猛常精进。譬如为少火，巧是速令灭，于佛教法中，世代者已然。Okay, so I just read through the English. I'm not going to do. Last week I did a little correction. I don't think anybody noticed, but I did. Now that I've got it, I should make a point of it. It'll either clarify things or upset people, but in any event, I was quoting a series of text from the previous section, and let's see. Yeah. So in the previous section, there's a line I quoted. Go back, if you look at your verses, you find it, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the thinking mind. Anybody got that, where that is? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and thinking mind. This would be in the previous section of verses. The sensory organs all are empty and without a nature. Do you see that? Anybody have that page? Page what? 6? I don't think so. Is it? No? Does it go way back to 6? And we're on 18? Oh, hang on. Okay, let me look at this. You're right. Okay, thank you. If you look at that, the last line is 往心分别有. Okay, so we've talked about this before, but the 分别here translated as, but the false mind discerns them. You see the English? But 分别is not to discern, it's the positive side of discrimination. But this is referring to something that is called prapancha, which is the proliferation of mad consciousness. It's the man mind. And so it's actually coming from the Yogacara teaching. The false mind, look at the comment, the false mind can't discern, right? I mean, that's at its face illogical and contradictory. So the false mind imagines them, projects them, constructs them, fabricates them. This is what's going on. This could be rendered as discern, but discern is then discrimination of what the true mind does. Very different than the false discriminating mind. So I just wanted to point that out. That, I think, is a mistranslation. Although technically, according to the dictionary, you could say discerns. But the false mind actually is not discerning at that point. It's in a cloud. It's confused. Are empty without nature, but the false mind thinks, conjures them, imagines them as real. So that would be imagines rather than discerns. Anyhow, so if we go to tonight, I don't know why I digressed right off the bat, but I did. So let's get to tonight. And then the text, and I just read through it. I'm not going to make any major changes tonight. Although if you spot something, please speak up. From the Chinese to the English. Let's see. So the basic question remains, why do some derive benefit, others do not? And then the verses start tonight with very diligent leader. So this is, diligence would be, what's the Chinese you see in the verses for a translation of diligence? To be diligent. Hint, hint, I think it's in the second verse there. Jingjin. Jingjin. Diligent, vigorous, attentive. So, all right? So this is interesting that then diligence leader basically has another version of diligence, and it's the opposite of all the other lines here, laxness. So laxness contradicts diligence, and we'll go into that some. So he begins to answer. He says, disciple of the Buddha, listen well, and I will now answer truthfully. Why is it that some soon gain liberation while others have trouble getting free? This very much comes close to what the Master Huineng says in the Platform Sutra. He says, there are different schools. Some say there's the direct or the immediate sudden. Some say there's a gradual. He says, the Dharma is one Dharma. There's only difference in people's faculties. So this becomes then getting away from, because the previous thing is the Dharma's one, it's all in the same. Why does he speak all these different Dharmas, expedients, and so forth? It's because of people's faculties. But actually the Dharma itself is of a single flavor. It's called the flavor of liberation, Vimutti Rasa. And so, although, and then you have your line, why is it some soon gained liberation? Why did they gain liberation while others had trouble getting it? It's not that the Dharma is difficult or easy, it's that people's faculties are dull or sharp. That's a distinction that's being made. So he says, listen, I'll explain, while some have trouble getting free. You just point out here this very interesting, they have trouble getting. They have trouble getting free. It's a very different notion here. So the notion of them, what Dharma's for, is for getting free, obtaining the ultimate perfection of liberation and freedom in the human potential, as opposed to getting something. So he's not talking about getting Dharma as much as getting free using the Dharma. He says, in the second line it says, in seeking to expel and eliminate limitless past evil deeds, one must in the Buddha Dharma be courageous and constantly vigorous. That's the Jingjin. Then it goes on to say, however, you could say, however, suppose there was only a tiny flame. Wet sticks would cause it to quickly die out. Within the Dharma taught by the Buddhas, so too it is as one for who is lax. Shiedai, lax. Okay? And now these are beautiful, basically saying you can't have a fire burst with wet sticks. Or suppose to make a fire, one rubbed wood together, but just stopped to rest before it was produced. I don't know if any of you ever tried this. Any have to go through the scouting technique of rubbing sticks together to get fire? No? You had to do that? Who? Your brother did it?
No.
I love it. Okay. You didn't have to rub the sticks together. Hmm. You used a Bic lighter, probably, huh? Okay. But basically, this is a very beautiful metaphor that's used throughout, especially in the Chan tradition. It said that when you are sitting in Chan, only when you sit for a long time is there dhyana. Just as when you dwell in one place for a long time is there relationship affinities. And the problem often with most of the Dharma doors is we stop short of making the fire. We rub it for a little while, we get tired or weary, we say it's not working, and then we shift and use other sticks or go to some other method completely. We keep hopping around. And this one basically is saying the efficaciousness is in the perseverance to the point that you cut through all your doubts and hesitations. And the doubts and hesitations grow as you rub the sticks. So that's why it says when the way goes an inch, the obstacles grow a foot. And so forth. So it's almost as if when you reach the darkest hours just before the dawn kind of imagery here, when you reach that point where you're really making progress, the karmic obstacles start to come quicker and quicker and quicker, and the opposition and resistance come at that point. What the text is saying tonight is that's why people fail, because Lao Tzu has some expression, I forget what it is, but it has people within an ace. Do you know within an ace of completing their task? He's an English translator. So what is within an ace of completing your task? British expression. Yeah, everybody's going, no. It's like an inch within an ace. You're just almost there. Stop short. People within an ace of completing their task stop short. And he's expressing the same thing. It's through this perseverance, this constant perseverance, even as and when it starts to reach resistance, ultimate resistance. Actually, that's a sign that you're making progress. And at that point, though, you have to be then resolute. They say have the mind of a great hero. Because at that point, you give in and yield, the fire never starts. It's the same way you rest before it's produced. The potential of the fire, with its stopping, would die. So too for one is lax. Then it goes on, if one held a crystal under the sun, this is a magnifying glass, but failed to use tinder to catch a reflection. So if you're going to use a magnifying glass to start a fire, if you do it just right, you can bring it down to a focal point, and that focal point of the sun is so intense that it will cause something to burn. But if you got wet sticks there, it's not going to do it. So the tinder means this very, very dry material to start the fire. Consequently, no fire could be obtained. So does too for one who is lax. Now this is very interesting because it could mean you bring the light of practice to bear, but you're not holding precepts. There's no tinder. So as a result, there's no flame, nothing sparks. It's like the light is put on mud. Okay? You're not holding precepts is murky mud. Your moral character, your ethical sensibility is murky and muddy. It's not clear. As a result, no matter how long you put that light, the magnifying glass on that, everything's going to happen because there was never substance there to begin with, precept substance. Or suppose in the bright sunshine, a young child shuts his eyes and then asks absurdly, why can't I see? You do this with kids, right? You play the game. I can't see you. Where are you? You go, oh, there you are, this kind of thing. You ask absurdly, why can't I see? So does one was lax. This is a very interesting, as a child shuts his eyes, there's ways to shut your eyes in meeting these teachings. One is to just not read them. The other thing, not listen to them, so you shut your ears. The other one, not to practice them, so you numb your body against cultivation and so forth. But then you say, I can't see, there's no result, there's no progress. Why is that? Because the eyes aren't open. In the Lotus Sutra, it's a very interesting, the Buddha's expression, they had eyes but could not see, the thus come one, the ears but could not hear, Nishyanda Buddha. And basically saying, even though you have eyes and ears, there's a heart that's connected to the eyes. The eyes and ears are just portals. but it's the mind, the heart consciousness that then hears and sees really. And without that heart and mind, the eyes and ears are basically just canals where things go in and out. There's a wonderful passage. There's a similar passage in the Bible. Anybody know that allusion? I think it's from the New Testament. Eyes and could not see, ears and could not hear. Expand your reading, Read the sutras, read the Bible, read Shakespeare. Come on, have fun. Or suppose one without hands or feet wished to use a blade of grass to pierce and break the great earth asunder, like drilling, right? You're going to drill or shovel. So too it is one is lax. In other words, without effort and the right tools, you won't be able to break through. Or suppose when you use the tip of a hair to dip out water from the ocean. This is a wonderful. Wishing to render it completely dry, so too it is for one who's lax. You probably never tried that too. Now go home tonight. Just think, what is that metaphor? Fill a bowl with water and say, before I go to bed, I'm going to empty the bowl by taking a hair and taking it out drop by drop. Let me know next week how that worked. Now there's a story, I think, from another tradition. It said a child was a sage, and the child was at the seashore. I remember them. I don't remember their sources. This is what happens when you get younger. The child's at the seashore and has dug a hole in the sand and is running to the ocean back again with a little cup and pouring water into the hole. And this supposed sagely guy walks by and says, "Child, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm emptying the sea into this little hole." And the sage says to the child, "That's absurd. You could never do that. The sea is vast and the hole is small." And the child said, "Is that any different than you trying to fill your mind with all the knowledge of the world?" So it was obviously not just a little kid. It was somebody's all these stories. And suppose the tip of hair, and then you go, suppose a Kalpic fire ignited, and one had hoped to put it out with a little water within the Dharma taught by the Buddhists, so too it is one for one who is lax. Or when someone gazes into space and physically does not move, yet says he can soar through the air, so it is for one who is lax. So here's a series of 10 analogies. And if we try to take them apart, they're all rich. And these particular sections of text are really fun to memorize too, because they're poetically memorable, but the analogies really stick. And sometimes I think this is why analogies are used, because they're concrete, they're physical, and then they help kind of stimulate an orientation of almost a philosophical stance, because it can be so vivid and telling. So here it comes out basically the shiadai, which is the laxness. And let me suggest some themes here, and then let's see what you think. I think one thing it's obviously saying again and again, which is Dharma's not Dharma unless it's taken up and practiced. So you can call it Dharma. You can say we have the sutras, we have the shastras, we have the canon of the Vinaya and so forth. But what makes it Dharma? It is not Dharma unless it's taken up and used and practiced. By itself, and this is what these verses are talking about, it's neutral, almost as if it's sterile. Sometimes they use the expression like dried tea leaves until you put the hot water on. The tea flavor doesn't come off. So the teachings themselves are just a collection of hypotheticals or what ifs, or consider this. And even when the Buddha talked, he would teach ehipasiko. Think about this, think this over, consider this. But he meant taste it. He meant take it into your life and practice it, and then see what the flavor is. I mean, it says it has one flavor, then flavor by analogy is something you taste. It's not something you just think about or speculate about. So it's just like medicine in that way. So the text is pointing out that Buddhism, Bodhisattva sages respond to the one great matter, the causes and conditions of one great matter, which is human suffering, and also at the same time the potential to end that suffering, the potential for full awakening. And that's what they respond to. That's the one great matter they're paying attention to. They dispense, but unless it's absorbed, unless it's embodied, nothing happens. And that is why, the first line, some soon gain liberation while others have trouble getting free. Basically, it has to do with either you apply it and you get free, or you don't apply it. And it seems like you're having trouble. The trouble, though, clearly here is being stated, it's not the Dharma. The Dharma is not the problem. The problem is lack of vigor and energy to take it up and practice it. I'll go into this a little more. I think the second maybe tone or tenor of the text is that all living beings completely have all the ingredients or the capacity for full awakening. It's inherent, and as the text says again and again, it's not lacking in us. Again, it can seem as if it's lacking, but their text is saying it's not lacking. That seeming lack is you're not taking it up. You're not actually using it. So then it seems like it is lacking, but is the person who's creating the lack. So without effort, when they said without rubbing and polishing, you don't get it. It all depends on you. So this is very interesting. There's a kind of very dynamic, I would say, almost inescapable connection between Dharma and doing. Dharma is to be done. And without the doing, it's not Dharma. But doing without the theory of the Dharma also is fruitless. So there's a combination there. With the Dharma standing alone, it's just sterile. Practice without the Dharma is blind. And so you need both of them together. But this is the part that gets lost. Even if you memorize it, commit it to memory, you bow to it every day, and you can recite it verbatim, unless you actually incorporate it into a change in your person, changing your personality, really digging and becoming a different person, it's still not Dharma. Dharma's Dharma and you are you, and never the twain will meet. So this is why Hanshan, Cold Mountain Hanshan, there's two Hanshans, and Hanshan Deching, who was a prolific writer, scholar, practitioner, monk. And then there's Cold Mountain Hanshan, who was not a prolific writer. He just wrote poems on rocks and trees and woods and the mountains in China. But this is from Hanshan Cold Mountain. And he says, talking about food won't make you full. Babbling about clothes won't keep out the cold or rain. A bowl of rice is what fills the belly. You say, or a bowl of noodles or a bowl of tofu fills the belly. It takes a suit of clothing to make you warm, or jackets and so on and so forth. And yet, and again, here's the analogy, and yet without stopping to consider this, to look at this truth, you complain the Buddha is hard to find. Then he finishes his poem, he says, turn your mind within, there he is. Why look for him outside? This is Cold Mountain's poem. So basically, he's using analogies too. He says food, clothes, what else? Food and clothes. Clothes, food, those two, right? Yeah, he doesn't mention, huh? Food and clothes. Food and clothes will keep out the bowl of rice, fills the belly, clothes keep you warm. Now sometimes that is extended to sleep. Food, clothes, and sleep. Just as someone sleeping won't rest you, you have to sleep yourself to get the rest. What does he mean, turn your mind within? There he is, why look for him outside? This is very tricky, because very often people just say, well, he's just talking about meditation and turn your mind within. Why look for him outside? What do you think? Any thoughts on that? Go ahead. Huh? You have, well, yeah, outside would be looking outside your own.
If I look outside, I'm mimicking or something like that. I'm not looking right.
Some people have taken this to be the interior practice of meditation. I don't think that's what he means. When he says, turn your mind within, he means return your mind to you, your body, your mind, your emotions, your life. And that's where you find it. It's very much like Huineng when he says the Buddha Dharma is right here in the world. It's not apart from the world, not apart from your world that you're living in right now. To look for it apart from that, your existential now reality, your relationships, your job, your day-to-day existence, looking for it outside of that field, outside of that domain, he says, is like looking for a rabbit with antlers. It can't be. So looking, do not look outside means outside your own being, outside your own person, outside your own home, so to speak, your own dwelling. It's in this very life, in other words, and in the actual day-to-day details of this very life. That's why the cultivation often is done with an examination of not the profound esoteric far out, but actually when he goes in his verse tonight, I'm trying to find that. Seeking to expel and eliminate limitless past evil deeds, limitless present evil deeds, and by extension, potentially future limitless evil deeds. So there's a past, present, and future in terms of some kind of continuity here, but the mind that attends to this now is not dwelling on those past, but saying, acknowledging, that I did, that was off, that was wrong. The present is the moment of opportunity, and if that's not taken, then future evil deeds will naturally come. So the energy here that's being offered with, I think, with Han Chan's poem, when he says, do not seek outside, he's basically saying it's the buried ground under one's feet. And the limitless evil deeds are the ones you're getting rid of. So again, it's getting rid of that which obstructs, not getting something from the outside that adds to, because there's nothing that needs to be added to. The obstruction is what we can't see through and let go of. It's not imposed from without. And this becomes very tricky because it seems as if in the state of, I would say sort of remorse, regret, self-reflection, it seems as if everything that's impeding is outside of us or coming to us or hitting us. But in fact, what the text is saying here and what Han Chan is saying, it's actually what we can't see through and let go of. There are no impediments other than that. So, I mean, this is the heart of the Heart Sutra as well. So I think lax here, translated as lax, is probably the deal breaker on these verses. It's the major impediment. Faith, belief, hope are necessary, but they're not sufficient. When you begin this practice of cultivation, there's a battle going on. I won't say it's a violent battle, but it's an intense battle between your good roots and your karmic obstacles. Your good roots are the accumulation of energy, sustenance that moves you forward, that brings you into the Dharma, that makes you want to change your life and really wake up and so forth. Karmic obstacles are the things that you have also laid down that then impede and obstruct that. And so at that point, much of cultivation, especially in the beginning part, is this constant tension between good roots going forward, lifting you up, and then karmic obstacles entangling, pulling you down. And here, it seems as if what he's saying, practice decides. What battle, what's the outcome of this battle? How does it get decided? Only through practice, only through sustained cultivation, avoiding laxness. And then the 10 analogies we have. This one that I just keyed in on tonight because it reminded me of a passage from Mencius. Who's Mencius? Well, he might have been a student of Confucius. Some say he was, some say he wasn't. But yes, you're right. Technically, He's part of the Confucian teaching. Who else is in there? Yang Wei, yeah, there's another one. Any event, Mencius is actually one of the, it's the title of one of the 4 books, the 4 classics, Sishu. What are the Sishu? What are the 4 classics? Not you, Connie, because you've been answering too much. Come on, what are you doing, looking it up? Oh, yeah. That's a kind of laxness. Dashui, Jungyung, who? Well, that's the, Jungyung is called sometimes the doctrine of the mean or centering. Dashui is the great learning. Lunyu, translated as the Analects, and then Mengzi, Mencius, the book of Mencius. Of the 4, which is the largest? No! Is it the largest or the Mencius? Yeah, see? Look it up. That's going to become my expression for don't look it up. Look into it. Okay. Anyhow, in Mencius, he says this thing he calls benevolence or humaneness or kind, compassionate engagement with humanity. He says you have to practice it with all your might. It must be practiced with all one's might. This alone will preserve it. It won't be preserved by books or texts or tapes or writing it down, only practicing with all your mights. And then he says, and this is very going off this verse, benevolence subdues its opposite. Isn't that wonderful? Benevolence subdues its opposite. What would be the opposite? Huh? Evil. Well, evil, yeah. Evil, harming, hatred, bigotry, stinginess, indifference to humanity, callousness. All of these would be the opposite of Ren. The character here is Ren, which is now I'm doing the Chinese thing. Oh. Yeah. But my simple Chinese character of a person with 2. Character 2. Now, some people say that the meaning of that is how 2 people should relate to each other. So Zhen has to do with a description of how humanity, we should relate to our fellow beings. We are one and the same source and root, and we treat each other as brothers, sisters, mothers. The interesting, the origin character of that, going back to the, what would be the beginning origins of Chinese characters? Oh, the oracle bones, there you go. They were actually bones that were used to do divination and whatnot, and the earliest characters come from that. The earliest configuration or the representation of Zhen was actually the picture of a pregnant woman. So it's even going deeper into relational. As a mother and child are so commingled, related, so should we be. And this is why my friend, colleague Henry Rosemont developed what he called the relational ethics rather than even Kantian ethics or even, you might say, virtue ethics. It's the heart of good ethics is going back to the fundamental relationships, and the most fundamental relationship is that between a parent and child, or a mother and child specifically. And there you have the basis for an unconditional Zhen, which is not transactional or performative, it's actually intrinsic. And so what Mencius was hinting at here, I think, is this idea is this is the deepest element of our humanity, is this fundamental first relationship. And from that, and neuroscience now confirms and supports that, all our ethics, all our compassion, all our empathy derives from that early relationship, especially in the first 4 years. So I could go into that in detail, but I just want to say that this is something that Mencius knew a long time ago. And now neuroscience and neurodevelopment is actually picking up on that. For example, there is a moment in a child's development when they develop what's called intersubjective sensibility. The mother or father is holding the child, and the child is attentive to the mother and father. And then the mother or father look at something else and have a reaction and go, oh, you know, or upset or whatnot. And the child looks at that, what's being looked at, and an internalization then occurs and a triangulation between the event and the emotion imprinting on the mother. So if that is not occurring, then the child's window for that neurological development of, say, empathy isn't watered, isn't preserved. And because it's not preserved, it can be recovered later, but with difficulty. So this is why in the neuroscience they're saying, especially at these ages, avoid putting the child just in front of a screen. Allow for the triangulation so they learn what it is to be human through the human reaction of the mother or father, so forth, in this thing. And once that is developed, it'll flourish for the rest of the life. But without that development, what develops is a kind of unfeeling, distancing, alienation, unfeeling towards other human beings. So the opposite develops. And so it's actually a relationally, neurological, physical, relational situation that gets to these values of empathy and kindness. Anyhow, so he says, benevolence subdues its opposite just as water subdues fire. Those, however, who nowadays practice benevolence do it as if with 1 cup of water. If they use it as 1 cup of water, how could they save a whole wagon load of fuel which has caught fire when the flames were not extinguished? And then they would say, water cannot subdue fire. They just didn't use enough water. So Mencius is doing this example to say a cup of water doesn't extinguish a burning house. And you conclude that water is not effective, efficient. He says not only is that wrong, you just didn't use enough virtue or benevolence or water, so to speak. He says, but they're very interesting. This conduct, moreover, encourages greatly those who are not benevolent. So if you make statements like that, if you say goodness cannot overcome evil, courage cannot overcome cowardice, and so forth, and if you say that and promote that, basically you create a despair and hopelessness, and in a sense, you greatly encourage those who are not benevolent. So you actually fuel the opposite by that. And then he says the final issue will be this, and it's a very powerful line, the loss of that small amount of benevolence even. It's a very, very powerful line. And he says benevolence must be matured. And he says of all the seeds, the best are the 5 grains, yet if they be not ripe, they're not equal to basically chaff, the stuff that's thrown away. So too the value of benevolence depends entirely of its being brought to maturity. Brought to maturity. Cultivation is nothing more than bringing to maturity these good roots. I mean, this is really what it's talking about. And he's saying you have to do it wholeheartedly. You can't be lax. You can't slough it off. And he finally finishes this section of text. These are in the chapters 18, 19, 20s of Mencius, if you want to look this up. This learning cannot be done by halves. Another way of saying half-assed, half-hearted, okay? And I teach people to shoot archery. I make the rule to draw the bow to the full. And I ask my pupils to do the same by metaphor with benevolence. Draw your bow to the full. Don't hold back when you're developing this. Bring it to full maturity. Oh gosh, time getting by. Let me look a little bit, and maybe we'll finish this up next week on how many of you are familiar with that expression in Chinese, xie dai? You see it in the line, right? That's the closing line of all the, I think, the 8 through 10 verses, right? So it is too, it closes, so too for one who is lax, so too for one for lax, so too for one who is lax. And he says, xie dai, jie yiran yiran, means similar, like that. So it is with laxness. Does this, in your kind of Chinese colloquial, have a catch with you? Does it have some purchase on you? Is it used to scold, or what is it? How is it used? Or is it just so classical that nobody uses that? I remember my teacher saying something like "lan duo." Lan duo means kind of lazy, right? But I don't remember her xie dai. Is that formal classical, or 70% formal? So how would you use it in conversation? Formal conversation. Oh, okay. Well, if we look at it, and we should look at it in some depth here because it has to do with its opposite, which is Jingjin, which is vigor. And vigor, Jingjin, is also one of the paramitas, the 6 paramitas. So there's morality, concentration, wisdom, vigor. Let me see, morality, the 6 paramitas: giving, morality, giving, patience, vigor, concentration, wisdom. Vigor, and I forget what the Sanskrit is. Virya. Mm-hmm. Interesting, coming for virile from the Sanskrit to, interesting. Okay, Shida, it's behavior that shows no interest in energy. Someone who's unwilling to take action, especially over something that's important. So here is where we have to be careful with tonight's text. This isn't talking about vigor in terms of athleticism or vigor in terms of making money or starting businesses. This has a particular application of spiritual vigor, which is very different than just material vigor. But it also has this energy level, not using energy, not exerting yourself in matters that are important. Okay, that's the key here. It doesn't just mean being vigorous, hyper, pink bunny going. Pink bunny? It's one of those things on TV. I think pink bunny goes, never stops. It's an advertisement for a battery. Okay, so, where you're going is important. It's not that you're just going and beating a drum. So that's the energy part, but there's an ethical part too for laxness, and that has to do, that means you're not careful and strict about maintaining high ethical moral standards. You allow yourself to become morally dissolute, develop bad habits. So laxity is both energy level and ethical level, and sometimes they go hand in hand, but just be clear that it has both of these in mind. The Sanskrit, I believe, is something called kausidya, Kausidya. So it's an actual technical term. And some people translate it as spiritual lethargy or spiritual laziness or just laziness. But it is not so much not doing as clinging to unwholesome activities. So this is very psychological, it's very different. It's not simply doing and being energetic, but it has to do with clinging to unwholesome activities. In other words, you're not exerting yourself to get out of the mud. You're just simply yielding to a kind of pattern in your life and just giving up, in a sense. And it has to do with being lazy or slothful in the cultivation of purification of the mind. So this is again, it's a very look within idea. It's vigor applied on that realm. And it's also not having energy to engage with what is positive. So this is very interesting. You might have energy, you're clinging to things, clinging to unwholesome activities, that's one thing. You may not also have it in the sense of not putting yourself forward into engaging with what is positive. So you can see there's a very subtle, it could look like you're just being regular. It could look like you're okay. You're holding down your job, you're eating, sleeping, wearing clothes, you're making good investments, you're doing the right things at the ritual times of the holidays and celebrations, and you're going on. But you haven't engaged in anything that's really positive in a spiritual way. As T.S. Eliot says, I grow old, I grow old. I've measured out my life in teaspoons full. I've measured out in coffee spoons. This idea of a kind of banal, ordinary, unenergized, okay, mediocre, lukewarm, these kinds of things. That all laxness has to do. Just to go a little further, some of the text, especially from the Sanskrit tradition, define three types of laxness. It's very interesting. One is not wanting to do anything. So that's just like, I don't want to get out of bed. That kind of laxness. I don't want to come Friday night. I don't want to go to that retreat. I don't want to recite my mantras. I don't want to memorize. What else? I don't want to cross my legs and sit. I don't want to make any offerings today. Or I'm going to be vigorous and offer all the things I don't want. So my broken down car, the computer that doesn't work, I'm going to be vigorous and offer that. So, but it basically is referring to just a kind of inertia, not to move. And it becomes, we all know it's very human. It's just like not wanting to get up and get going. That's one kind of laxness. But there's also another kind, which is the laxness of discouragement, and then the laxness of busyness. Yeah, and so we ran out of time tonight, but next week I want to go into this a little more because these are seeming like, you can understand the first one, right? The first one is just not wanting to do anything. But what's the laxness of discouragement? What would that be? Say it again. And then, yeah, you're very close to what, very close is sort of a kind of, we feel ourselves unworthy and inadequate. Things aren't going well, and we just sell ourselves short and say, that's me. I've never been good at anything. I can't do this. It's a kind of defeatism, right? And so it's a kind of laxness because basically you just give up easily. Not only you give up easily, but the important part is you sell yourself short. And this is when you lose faith in yourself. So the three aspects of faith in the teacher, the teachings, and yourself, faith here is a kind of vigor. And so I'm saying what faith is manifested by vigor. It's not just a benign belief or hope, but faith itself is to avoid the second kind of discouragement and say, no, I didn't do it well, I can do it. Pick myself up and keep going. That is vigor, that is faith. But it's very easy to think, I'm not being lazy, I'm just being honest. I'm not good at that. I can't do that. Some people can recite, some people can memorize. I'm not even good at holding the precepts, What you're doing is you kind of paint yourself into this corner of inadequacy and incompetence and unworthiness, and you're right, you think it's an accurate assessment, but what it is, what the text is saying, is a very sneaky way of being lax, of stopping short. So this can creep in many ways. The last one, I'll go over next week because I think this last one is really important, but that's the one that comes from, how do they try to see what the definition is, of a busyness, the laxness of busyness. And it's kind of an oxymoron, but when you hear this, it'll make perfect good sense. Then I have some examples of whatnot I was going to use tonight, but ran out of time. So this text is very rich, and since the recurring line is lax, 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 I wanted to go into that somewhat of the layers of that and how it can be almost paradoxical. We can seem to be not lax, but in the spiritual application, it could be utmost laxity in the busyness of it. So how did Wei Nung put it? A frantic passage through life ends with bitter regret. And when he was talking about frantic, he was talking about this kind of false vigor. It's very interesting. Okay, any questions, comments? Ran out of time, sorry. That's how it goes. No fun stories tonight. When you are what, the Dharma? Living? Yes. So the question is, when you're putting Dharma to practice, are you working in the sixth and the eighth, or the eighth? Yes. There's only one consciousness. Okay, this is called I Xin, one mind. This is a fundamental teaching. However, it's used in different ways. So used in one way, it becomes eye consciousness or ear consciousness. Used in another way, it becomes discriminating consciousness. Used in another way, it's eighth consciousness. As the verse says, these are merely false names referring to a single thing. They aren't real. So we start to think of them as different parts of a brain almost, the frontal, the pre-orbital, whatever, the parts of the brain. But it's not. It's just, they're differences of function in a single consciousness. And that's why Wei Nung will say, using that consciousness well is the work of Buddhas. Misusing it is the activity of living beings. But it is the same consciousness. So it all depends on use. Okay? So the answer I gave was yes, and it wasn't just to be sort of smart alecky. It was saying you're always using consciousness. Whether you're using it well or misusing it is the question, but not which one you're using, right? So actually, when they're used well, each of the consciousnesses become a kind of wisdom. And when they're misused, the wisdoms become a kind of scattered consciousness. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we could go into more, but it's a good question. And it's like, and how could you actually divide up? Do you know when you're using the sixth or the seventh or the eighth? No. It's just like, yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments, observations? I think things are rather quiet around here at the monastery. Everybody's off in Australia. Heng Sure is still online, I believe, Saturday and Sunday. Do they have online things here at the morning recitation anymore? You can zoom in. So this is kind of a double-edged sword in the sense, on one hand, I was chiding you for looking things up because it's a kind of laxness. To struggle to try to figure things out and to struggle to how to put your words and thoughts into something coherent is the proper use of consciousness. And if we don't do that, if we just go to AI or chat GBT or whatever, that muscle doesn't develop. And even though we can quirk up the right answers, blah, 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 it's AI talking. It's not coming from the heart. It's not coming from a transformed consciousness. So it's a kind of, it seems like it could be vigorous. You're actually looking and working on things. But in a sense, it's a kind of laxness because you're not bringing yourself to maturity. And the bringing of maturity has to do with wrestling, articulating, thinking through, questioning, sifting and winnowing, examining your feelings and thoughts and emotions, which you only can do. There's no right or wrong answer that you can look up, Google and say, what's my awakening or no. It's sort of like it's something you really have to do. So there's no shortcut here. I'm just kind of being sort of cautious about using this, even to look up Dharma terms or Dharma talks or anything like this. It starts to atrophy one's inquiring mind, one's inquiring consciousness, and you become then sort of dependent, but you're not really dependent because it's not feeding anything. It's an actual kind of outflow that seems like you're feeding, but it's just like dental floss. It just goes in and out. There's no retention whatsoever. So be cautious and careful and modest in how you use these devices, because it's very easy to want to escape facing one's own consciousness and think that and it could be a kind of vigor of the third type, a kind of laxness actually. Also, it feeds the idea of, gee, I didn't know that. I'm not good enough to figure that out myself. Somebody else is brighter than me. Then you go down that road again. How did Emerson had a wonderful, you know Emerson? Who's Emerson? Ralph Waldo Emerson. You don't know him, but you know of him, right? You don't know him, but you know of him. What was he famous for? What? What did he? Walden. That was his buddy Thoreau. Yes, he wrote Self-Reliance, which has a section. No, yeah, trust thyself, but it has to do with know thyself too, so it's Socratic. There comes a time in every person's education when they arrive at the conviction that envy is ignorance and imitation is suicide, and that they must take themselves as their portion was given to them. The power that resides in them is new in nature, and no one knows what he can do until he has tried, and only by trying can you know this. This is from Emerson's Self-Reliance. It's the same spirit here of laxness and sort of countering the over-reliance on artificial intelligence and whatnot. Only you can know this, given on the ground. He says, tilling the ground that was given to you to till. This is mind ground. This is basically mind ground. No Buddhas or Bodhisattvas ever got to be Buddhas and Bodhisattvas through someone else's kick, boost, lift, or reliance. Sorry, it's maybe the one place left in the world where you have to do it yourself. Yes?
You memorize that, and the line that you memorize from the
Mm-hmm.
because it's very difficult for me to memorize anything these days. And then I look up on the internet and I get stuff. So, what should I do to improve my memory? It's so easy to rely on outside.
It is. It's easy, but it's also going back to Hanshan. It's watching someone else eat. You know, it's easy, but you don't get the nutrition, the nutrients of memorization. Next week, remind me, and I'll share with you a very interesting work that's just been done on memorization within Buddhist text and the psychological importance of that. I came upon, I was doing some research, and it's a very interesting discussion, not just about Buddhist texts, but in general, the art of memorization and what it has to do with human development and human consciousness. It's really interesting thing. If someone reminds me, send me an email to remind me, because I'll probably memorize something. I won't memorize that, but I'll memorize other things. And then I'll try to bring it up next week for you. But the other thing they're finding is, because it's hard, it's actually worthwhile doing. He says, with all your might, bring it to maturity, which means when there's resistance, you will actually open up the neural pathways by exercising and bringing it to bear. If I don't do Tai Chi almost every day, I go backwards. It's not like I maintain, I go backwards. And so by doing it, I keep those pathways open, those channels open. Same with memorization. It gets harder maybe when you get older, but that means you should work harder at it. And then you won't get older as fast. Yeah, what is it? Oliver Sacks, if you don't use it, you lose it. It's a saying, the neuroplasticity. You got to keep working on it. That's also a kind of vigor. Okay, enough editorializing. We'll do the transference in English. So I got two things to remember. Sweep and clean. No, two things to remember for next week is I'm going to talk more about the third type of laxness, but also bring up this thing about memorization. Okay. May every living being our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. In respect to the triple jewel,